why personal protective equipment's important. Sharpening, not necessarily to be super proficient at it, but to be able to recognize when is a chain sharp and when is it dull. Many of the techniques we'll be working with in felling, as well as limbing and bucking storm situations, we'll have to have precise bore cuts or use of the tip of the bar, undercutting using the top of the bar. So reactive forces of pushback, pull in, and kickback are very important for a chainsaw operator to understand. I have come to the conclusion that some of the best companies that I've worked with on chainsaw training have been some of the power companies and utilities. They do a great job of hiring them and training them. I'm not just speaking of chainsaws. They train them on how to be able to perform their task, whether it's linemen or facilities workers or their right-of-way crews. They all have a great understanding of their task at hand, how important it is to get those lines back up, to maintain them, to keep that power going out to our homes and businesses. They train them in all the aspects of their business. They have huge respect for their business, their customers, as well as their safety and production. Companies like PowerSouth, they care about their employees. They want to make sure they go home safely every day, but they want it also to be a productive task. Sometimes we learn things from the seat of our pants, from other people who have learned that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you know, when you get together with a group of employees that care about their jobs, care about their safety, and they start to learn how to take and put together plans and be able to execute those plans with some ideas and concepts that they may not be familiar with, the light bulbs come on. And you can really see them get into that training and know that they're picking up things that they're going to be able to use when that power goes down because of a tornado or a hurricane or some other situation in those lines and transmissions. PowerSouth has been planning this training with us for several months. They had the lines put up to be able to do the on-the-line training. They had the trees selected and areas cleared to be able to go in and take those trees down and also place some on the line. Their employees scheduled to come in, some from out of town, and be able to have hotels and all those things set up. They had breakfast, they had lunches brought out to the site. All of these things, a large amount of making this training process a positive situation for the employees. All things that make them learn better, that make them pick up things more. They understand how their employer cares about them and their abilities to do their tasks. And PowerSouth knows that incidents can happen on the job as well as at home. They want to make sure that training helps in all areas of their employees' lives. And chainsaw is one of them that's kind of an international language when it comes to having to work on storm situations as well as some maintenance and some work around the house. They do a great job hiring good people and training them to do their jobs. I'm not just speaking of training for chainsaws. I'm talking about in general the way they do business, how the employees are expected to react, how they're trained to be able to handle their tasks. All of those things are important to have a good, flourishing company and satisfied and happy employees. They do a great job of hiring and also training the employees to handle their specific duties and tasks. I think a key is managers come up through the company. They have been valuable employees and they have become very valuable managers. They care about their people because they've been there. They know what the task is and they make sure that their employees are up to speed, up to ability to handle that task. For the weeks of training, which I was there 3 weeks, they had breakfast for the employees on day one. They had lunches prepared each day and brought out to the site. They had spent countless hours putting up a training line that actually would take and simulate a storm situation that we placed trees on to be able to take and cut those down. Selected the participants They grouped them correctly for their abilities, their background knowledge, and also their job tasks that they were asked to do in their normal daily duties. The training had been planned since fall of 2022. PowerSouth put up a great training area. They planted poles and more or less they ran some guy wire through them so that we had some strength there. It wasn't going to break down, so we were able to work safely without thinking about the line coming down. And then it was on terrain, so we had some angles. We were able to look at the way the line sagged. The distance between the poles was standard. We were using, I think, 45-foot poles, and then able to drop these trees onto it. And the pine trees, we tried to put singles, larger ones. We put crisscrossed so that we had some angles to work in with. We had situations of, we tried to get the trees to flip over so that we could actually work from the top that was down and be able to slide them down the line. All of these things are situations that they see in storms. So it's important to kind of invent those situations on the training lines so the guys have an idea of what can work and what doesn't. One thing that made this training program really work, the guys were on time. They had all their gear, they were dressed properly, definitely instructed about what was going to take place and what was expected from them. It made it so nice to be able to actually move through. Everyone was ready to go every time I was ready to go. We were actually able to finish early on each class because we covered everything. They practiced what they needed to practice there. They understood it. We answered all the questions, and we were able to move through the 2.5 days of the 3-day program in right at a little over 2 days. And then we were able to place the trees on the line. Usually you have to do some refresher to be able to make sure everyone still has their planning processes and notches and hinges down before we go on to the line, because it's important they can do those things. And then we place those trees and then work through the scenarios in teams. They were ready to go. So we were actually able to finish up the classes early each day and in each week. That's very unusual because of, well, not only employees being on time and ready to go with their equipment, but also weather and those kind of things can affect our timing. So we have to kind of make sure we have enough time to not rush through, but when things are covered, we're able to finish it a little bit sooner. We began with a morning inside, working on the board, talking through basics of the planning processes, why personal protective equipment's important, why sharpening is one of the most important things for employees to understand. Not necessarily to be super proficient at it, but to be able to recognize when is a chain sharp and when is it dull. Then we went on into reactive forces, because many of the techniques we'll be working with in felling as well as limbing and bucking storm situations will have to have precise bore cuts or use of the tip of the bar or near the tip of the bar, undercutting using the top of the bar. So reactive forces of pushback, pull in, and kickback are very important for a chainsaw operator to understand. We then go on to what we call reduced downtime maintenance. We take a look at what time it takes to be able to make sure that that piece of equipment is working correctly. How do you quickly check to make sure the safety features, the air filter, all the nut screws and bolts and no leaks, making sure the starter system works, and then also a little bit about how to place the chain on, how to correctly tension it, how to make sure the bar and sprocket wear is not too excessive. All of those things we look at. Then we take and start to put in the planning processes. And that's where we have to take a look closely at standing trees as well as a horizontal position. Standing, hazards and obstacles, making sure a spot is wide enough and long enough. Taking a look at how tall a tree is. How can we measure the height to make sure we're not going to come in contact with other trees or objects? Where are the leans of the trees? That's side to side to that particular spot, and also forward to back. In the case that we had at PowerSouth, of very tall, thin pine trees. Most of them were in the 12-inch to 15-inch DBH range, and probably 85 to 90 feet tall. And these trees are almost straight. You had to pretty much make them do what you needed them to do to go to the positions. The guys did a great job of being able to place them down. We had a little competition. Even had a first place winner that took one of my chainsaws with a perfect score. But then we also had the Golden Wedge Award for the other high scores of the other 2 days. But it's something where, you start to look at, we focused in on different things using those points that are important to chainsaw operation and safety. And then horizontal. Crisscross those trees that we felled so that we could take and be able to look at different pressures and binds. We were across ditches, elevated areas, stumps, across other logs. So all of those things were planned, and the guys did a fantastic job of bucking those down, looking at up and down pressures, side to side pressures, back and forward pressures, and then what types of cuts to be able to use. And in many cases, as in felling, we used notches and hinges to be able to control the movement. And then it came down to placing trees on the power line. And that's really what this training is all about. You see, these folks have to go in after storms and be able to get the trees and debris, place power poles back in spots after tornadoes or hurricanes have removed them, or stack trees on top of them. And it's very, very dangerous business. So training is important to be able to understand some of those pressures and binds and offer some techniques that can make things a little bit safer and possibly a little more productive in some cases. But looking at what does it do when it's on the line, how much it has in pressure. Is the line going to throw the tree? Is it going to roll off? What kind of positions you need to be in? But what we found out was the notch and the hinge properly placed can really work well in those situations. Finished up each day kind of reviewing what we learned and some of the things that stuck out in the training that enabled them to pick up something that they didn't already understand. In all cases, the bore cut, the hinge, the notch, and being able to plan were all things that they had not considered in the same way. And that's what makes training something that's important to employees. And that's the reason why companies like PowerSouth had put that together. They knew that in groups like that, they could contribute the time and maximize their retention. A lot of people ask me, say, well, are they ready to go? Are they able to go out now and do the task? No, that's not what training is all about. And as I mentioned to a lot, I see a lot of guys and gals that go to colleges, universities, finish high school, whatever it might be, and they say, oh, we're ready to go now. The whole concept of the training, that you pick up things that you haven't seen before, now the training starts. Now you go out and apply those things to different scenarios, different situations, different work sites. You have to practice. You have to take and get good at those things that you learned. It's not really a certification. Until we take the workshop or the training class, we apply it and practice it. And that's what gives us the ability to work safely and be able to co-work. Another thing is that, so many times we think about, if we don't plan the same way, we're going to be bumping heads. But if we plan the same way, we can all contribute to that plan and usually come out with the same results. That's important. So we're not doing something different that's going to not result in a positive outcome. Because we talk about, first thing, that an accident is an unplanned event. And safety is an awareness of those things to put in the plan. This is Tim Ard wishing you good sawing.